Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. We're in for a very special episode today. Number one, because I have back Steve Vincze. Steve has been a guest on the pod before, but we wanted to take maybe a little bit different, unique look at the Astronomer, Leo, if I can use that word. I think everyone has seen or heard about this story. So hopefully we don't have to give too much detail other than the former CEO and the former head of HR. We're seeing canoodling or swaying to the music, as someone might say, at a Coldplay concert, and this went viral. And while canoodling or swaying to the music at a Coldplay conference is not in and of itself offensive, they were both married to other people, which made it offensive. But Steve has some really perhaps interesting ways for us to explore this beyond the prurient. So Steve, I asked if you'd come on and visit with us. So what are maybe some of your initial thoughts around this from governance, from policies and procedures, from internal controls, or in your specialty, compliance?
Thank you, Tom. And again, a real honor and privilege to be on your podcast and to be with your viewers. So, like everyone else out there, when I saw this unfolding on social media and television, what struck me as a professional was that everyone was focused on the individual, prurient, personal, and professional fallout on the CEO and the HR person that he was with, and really didn't talk about the company, Astronomer, in terms of where did they go next? What did they do next? How do they recover? And so I focused on that because I've had experience advising companies on exactly that kind of situation. In fact, exactly 20 years ago, in 2005, I was invited to the global headquarters of Boeing Corporation in Chicago to discuss how do you recover from a corporate sucker punch to the solar plexus that you weren't expecting as a company. Because guess what happened there? Their CEO at the time was dismissed because of an extramarital affair with a subordinate C-suite executive. So while what we saw unfolding on social media was very unique in how it unfolded, the circumstances of affairs of the heart between executives is nothing new. And so the question becomes, what should the company do to recover? What we've seen unfold is an former Twitter posting by Gwyneth Paltrow, who, in her own words, was very temporarily retained as a spokesperson. And the founder of Goop gave us some goop, if you will, and made it seem like a little light of it, but at the same time refocused on who the company is and what they do in terms of their services. I'm sure people have different perspectives on how that rubs you one way or the other. But I did want to share from my experience, and the reason I was invited to Boeing, of course, because of the TAP case, which at the time was 4 years old, and we had recovered. And certainly I don't propose that I'm a PR expert, but from an internal perspective, there are some really consistent lessons that I would suggest to the company and to other companies that go through something like this. So first, one of the things that in working with the TAP case and then also talking with the Boeing executive team, one of the first things I think that's critically important to identify what I've identified as 5 critical success factors. And the first one is that what occurred should trigger a fundamental change to their internal culture. Don't sweep it under the rug. Don't ignore it. Own it. Own it as your problem that occurred on your watch. And I was really speaking to the board and the co-founders. And I think likely that they understand and accept it, but it's easy to explain something away like this. Oh, it was a bad hire. It was bad judgment. And all of that may be true, but still, it's the company that has this plastered across their forehead in scarlet letters, if you will. And they need to understand, accept that. Number 2, whoever the new president becomes, the senior leader, the number 1 person at the company, currently an interim person, they need to be personally involved out front, both internally and externally as representative. Number 3, They need to establish an ethics and compliance program that emphasizes ethics and compliance and core values. Who are they as a company? This is a wonderful opportunity. You can turn a very negative thing into a very positive by helping to reset, redefine your identity as a corporate culture, as a company grounded on principles. And that's critically important because you want to establish trust. Trust with your current employees, trust with recruiting future talent. That answers the question, why should I work for you? I don't want to be embarrassed with my family or others when I say I'm going to work for this company. You want them to be proud of that. So you have to reestablish that credibility and trust internally, but then also, of course, externally with customers in terms of what do you do and why should they trust you with their business. 4, be definitive, be precise, be clear as to what you're doing, how, and why. What's the why behind the what? It's easy to explain it away as some legal process, and that'll be the flavor of the month approach. But this has to be fundamental to your identity. And number 5, be prepared to walk away. Walk away from people that don't transition, don't get it. Walk away from business that where this may be seen as not something that's consistent with other businesses' culture. So those are 5 critical success factors that I shared with Boeing and that we established at TAP that worked very well for us. And then again, it's all about establishing trust and credibility. And there are 3 essential elements that I've identified that leaders need to incorporate in order to successfully establish an internal ethics compliance program. Now, let me pause before I get into those details and just say there are all kinds of differences between Astronomer and Boeing, not the least of which is that Astronomer is a privately held small boutique tech company, and Boeing is a global publicly traded company that's subject to SEC rules, etc. However, they share a fundamental common characteristic is that they're in business to produce value for their customers and to produce a way of life for their employees. And so anyone, whether it's a small business or a global monolith of a business, needs to understand that responsibility of establishing people say, my word is my bond, a handshake should seal the deal. That's the kind of trust and credibility you want to establish. And so in terms of the 3 essential elements that I identified for establishing that effective ethics compliance program within this company to turn it around is number 1, whoever they bring in as an ethics compliance leader, they need to be personally involved in every aspect of the program. And I would also suggest in this case for the new president, again, lead by example, be front and center, be the guide on, as they say in the military. Number 2, get the right people on your team. And again, in a smaller company, it could be a team of 1, team of 2, and outsource other aspects of it. But get the right people, by the right people, people that understand business, understand law, and can build a bridge between the two and explain it again in a way that's practical and sensible. And then finally, if that's all possible, but I think they've put this one front and center. Have fun as you're doing this. I think with Gwyneth Paltrow, and I'm sure it's no coincidence that she's the ex of Coldplay's frontman, and how all that came about. I'm sure it was an interesting backstory, but they had fun with that. And it probably, from what I've seen, the online reactions are mostly positive. But I would suggest from a business perspective, let's keep the humor a little lighter, a little bit afterwards, maybe internal. Let's not lead with that. But again, that's me. But I think in order to, again, seriously establish trust and credibility and a culture of values, that needs to come first. So I did want to share those key takeaway points with your audience, to include Astronomer if they're watching, or any other company, because I do think while technology and circumstance, our world is changing by the moment at lightning speed with AI, there are certain fundamental that are consistently true in terms of how you interact with people. And again, that's something I've written about in my book, Inspiring Integrity, How to Win with Compliance and Propel Performance.
Steve, I'd like to draw upon your military background for a few questions. And for our listeners who don't know, Steve was in the Marine Corps. And what I wanted to explore with you is from that experience, how can leaders sit down with employees, have a respectful conversation, but allow the employees to ask perhaps some hard questions or at least difficult questions? Was there a mechanism when you were in the Corps which allowed a a junior officer to have a free exchange of information with a more senior officer? And if so, is that a format or a strategy that Astronomer could use to have this kind of open conversation internally with its employees?
It's a great question, Tom, and the short answer is yes. And it's at multiple different levels. As a platoon commander in the Marines, I met every Thursday evening with my troops one-on-one. And one of the things they really impress upon you as a leader is get to know your troops personally, individually, their dynamics, what's working, what isn't on their personal life, because you're a Marine 24/7, and they're not going to perform well if there's trouble at home, whether that's be financial or personal, whatever. And so there are limits, of course, as to how you can help, but get to know your people. In a separate external to the military, I write about in my book an experience that I call the St. Paul of compliance, where this sort of tough, gruff, hard-nosed corporate leader, Wharton grad, a very successful businessman, founder of the company, thought he knew everything about his company. And I had to hold the phone out here when I first joined because I dared to speak to a lawyer in his company and not speak to him about ethics and compliance. And the bottom line is at my advice, he held a town hall meeting. And I said, Pat, you're a great leader, you're smart, but people are afraid of you. And there are things going on that you don't know about. He goes, bullshit. I said, give it a try. Now, there are some risks, and we'll set the ground rules. But I think if you show an openness and show your true self, who you are, that you're genuinely interested in doing everything properly, precisely to be successful as a business, people will appreciate that opportunity. They'll come forward, and you'll be a stronger, better informed CEO and company. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And as one person timidly raised their hand, it started to steamroll or snowball. So in the military, again, it's the military, particularly the Marines, tends to be a more formal process structure than certainly tech companies are internally. But the bottom line is people need to feel like they're in a safe environment, a respectful environment, a trusted environment where they're valued and their opinion matters within, again, limits. You're not going to be telling the CEO how to run the company, but if there are questions, you should be able to raise them. And so, the short answer is yes, and at different levels, different units would have different meetings with officers or with the enlisted folks. But again, each unit is different. The time frame changes over time. But the emphasis on transparency and leadership by example and making sure that you communicate with one another on a continuous basis, it's critical. Again, going back to Astronomer here, the head was chopped off of the company, right? You get the very top person. And so that needs to be replaced. It's, again, a wonderful opportunity, I would suggest, to reestablish who Astronomer is as a company and to get the right person. As I understand it, the gentleman who got caught on the kiss cam was essentially a sales and marketing person that was brought in, which is pretty typical as a company grows, particularly technology. And I've seen this in biotech and pharma, where the founders are the scientists or the technology people. They're the gurus that develop something unique. And then as that grows, they need help to sell it. And I think that's where they were. And they need to, again, establish with this person, whoever it is, that we're redefining and establishing who we are as a company from a cultural perspective. And it's, again, a great opportunity, I would suggest, to kickstart a company that fundamentally, from a technology perspective, should be doing well. And again, I think that's what they tried to address in that X commercial with Gwyneth Paltrow in terms of what they do, with a little tongue-in-cheek inserted there.
Steve, I'd like to pick up on a point you raised a little bit earlier, which was along the lines of, would you have pride working here? Because that speaks to two things: talent acquisition and talent retention. And I speak to a lot of people and HR professionals, and they, to a person, say talent acquisition and talent retention will be the key element for corporate success going forward. Whether or not AI is involved, it's going to be, do you have the best people? And are they staying here? And it speaks to a damage that is not on the bottom line. It is not a quantifiable fine or penalty. It's not a quantifiable cost of internal investigations. It's not even a quantifiable loss of business. But I was wondering if you could say a few words about the damage that can be caused by this type of scandal event, whatever we choose to call it, that is something that's not quantifiable, but at the end of the day may be as significant as any other damage.
You raise an excellent point. And just to put this in context in terms of what happened here, an affair between two executives or two leaders of an organization, I have to say through my career, which I won't say how many decades that goes because it'll date me too much, I've seen it every single place or have it rumored in one form or another. And that includes academics, it includes the political world, it includes the military, it includes business. I've seen it, I've heard it rumored. And again, it's not just anybody, it's the very top person at these organizations. And everybody knows this. The long historical accounts of presidents and other senior leaders. And bottom line, people are people. And this will continue to happen and since Adam and Eve, right? And so the real question then is, how do we put some appropriate boundaries to address this dynamic between people who work together, and what are the appropriate rules? So I think, that the bottom line here at this level is that there's a conflict of interest between a personal interest and a business interest. And as with all conflicts, the key is disclosure, and to say, and to put boundaries from a work perspective. If you disclose, look, I'd like to, but here also, as you mentioned, the two people were married. And that's, again, problematic in our current society in terms of what do you do. But so this is nothing new, but at the same time, again, appropriate boundaries, emphasis on transparency, and going forward in an appropriate way is, again, the messaging that needs to be established by someone who's credible and believable and articulates it and presents it in a way that people can say, yeah, I'm proud to work for this leader. Now, one of the things that companies have done in the worst of circumstances is rebrand. It's that they make a decision, what our name is so tarnished that let's really do a complete refresh and rename the company, rename the product, whatever it may be that needs to be renamed to totally cleanse the environment of the taint of whatever it is. I don't think they're there yet. Frankly, I don't know. We'll have to see. Again, it's a small company, and they'll have to, through their investigation and through working through this, I would suggest trying to capture the pulse of the employees and of the market that they're serving as to the reaction. I'm not sure I would have advised the Gwyneth Paltrow X this quickly in that tone. But again, it may have, and a word of caution too, just because the folks on the internet may be responding to it, checked it just earlier this morning, it's overall trending positive, but it may not be for the right reasons. People may find it funny and think and like it, but that doesn't mean it's effective from a ethics, compliance, corporate culture perspective, to the point that you said, in terms of retention and attracting new talent is the key. Again, a business is a collection of people that are tied together to pursue a common goal of producing value through a service or product. And the leader and the different leaders at different areas of that business have different expertise, whether it's from finance, from marketing, R&D, you name it. But that's the thing, is to create value. And the core of sales is to enter into an agreement with someone. And they have to believe you and trust you that you're going to deliver what you said you'd deliver. And if someone is out there publicly, the bottom line here, the CEO and HR person, to put it mildly, exercise poor judgment. The ultimate example of bad judgment. And they're probably, what are you thinking? You're going, and they're all from this area, and it's just up the highway from where I live in Foxborough. The CEO went to Providence College. They're all local. The HR lady was married to a prominent family from the Boston area. Even if you're not on the KISS cam, the chance of running into someone that recognizes you, given those dynamics, are probably pretty high. It's just, what are you thinking? And I think the answer is they weren't. And that's on them. And I'm sure they're paying some heavy personal and professional consequences. But again, to me, the question from a professional perspective is, so what about the company? What do they do? How do they recover? Is recovery possible? And that's one of the key messages I had for the Boeing team, is the answer is absolutely yes. Recovery is possible, but you have to do it in a very thoughtful, deliberate, concerted way that exhibits strong leadership, ownership of the problem, and clarity of what the solution is.
Well, Steve, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted to connect with you or find out any more information about the services you offer, what would be the best place or places for them to go?
Thank you, Tom. Again, a real pleasure. And I hope this was informative and helpful. The best place to find out about me and my services and get in touch with me is on our company website, which is www.tresselcompliance.com. And you can call me directly at 617-800-3704 or send me an email at stevevince@tresselcompliance.com. And Trestle Compliance is spelled the way it sounds. That's the best way. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to share these thoughts and experiences. And again, for the sake of Astronomer and the good people that are there. And that's always important to remember. Just because there's bad judgment by one or two people doesn't mean that everybody is that way. There is recovery, absolutely is possible. And so keep a stiff upper lip and march on. And I'm sure that if the services and technology are the way they sound, the future is bright.
Compliance Podcast Network. Start your mornings with daily compliance news, quick, sharp updates on the top compliance and ethics stories in under 5 minutes every morning in Compliance Podcast Network. Because compliance never sleeps. Need practical advice fast? Check out Compliance Tip of the Day. One actionable idea to level up your program. Short and sweet, every day on Compliance Podcast Network. Got 10 minutes? We've got the week's top 10 stories. 10 for 10 brings you the big compliance headlines. Fast, fun, and focused. Every Saturday on Compliance Podcast Network. And don't miss the Sunday Book Review, where compliance meets culture through must-read books and big ideas every Sunday in Compliance Podcast Network. Whether you're in the office, on a walk, or commuting, stay smart, stay ethical, stay tuned. Only on the Compliance Podcast Network. Available wherever you listen to podcasts.